Welcome to Thriller Recapped. Today, I will show you an American spy thriller film, based on true events called The Red Sea Diving Resort. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie kicks off with a convoy of jeeps running at high speeds through the vast and beautiful Ethiopian oasis. Riding the jeeps are armed men, shouting their battle cry, ready to engage their enemies. The year is 1979. And a refugee crisis is overwhelming the beautiful African country as the new government wages war with the rebels. An armed man empties his magazine, as he shoots through a hut, hoping to kill its occupant. The rebels raid an Ethiopian Jewish settlement, killing everyone. Thousands have died and millions displaced. A girl rushes into the hut, informing her mother that she had looked everywhere from the river to the road, and couldn't find her younger brother. Then her mother asks if she tried the field. Simultaneously, a boy calmly plays by the nearby areas, mimicking an airplane and avoiding the dried crops as he runs across. Not too long after, the trucks are seen approaching the village as it leaves a cloud of dust. A man named Kabid Bimro instructs everyone in the village to move fast, fearing they might get caught. The mother hesitates to leave her son named Tesfa, but she is forced by a man to move along. From a distance, Sammy Navone sits on the hood of a truck while rolling a cigarette, while Steve Rogers, Ari Levinson, does push-ups at the back of the truck while waiting for the asylum seekers. The wait didn't last long. Kabid, along with the others, emerges from the bushes. Just as he tells Ari that one of the kids is left behind, gunfire is heard. After loading up the truck with people, Ari looks at him and he runs off to where the others came from, hoping to save the boy left behind. Next, two trucks drive through the crop fields hunting for prey, and encounters a petrified Tesfa. As he blasts away, Ari runs in and grabs Tesfa out of the way. The hostile rebels didn't expect that and gets off their trucks to look for Ari and Tesfa on foot. Ari, a trained Mossad agent, flanks and evades the clueless armed rebels. He gets into the rebels' trucks and grabs a heavy box from the back. Then, the rebels get alert, and they see one of their trucks accelerates. They then shoot at the running truck while going after it until it crashes into a hut. One of the rebels opens the car door only to find a box on the gas pedal. Meanwhile, Ari and the others escape into the sunset. Later, the group and tribesmen journey through a desert, and they cross a river. Unlike Moses' exodus during biblical times, the water didn't part, and it took one life. Sammy tries to save the drowning woman but fails. Later, they arrive at the Jadarf refugee camp in Sudan. Kabid knocks on a door, and he is welcomed by an acquaintance. After distributing food, Ari, Sammy, and Kabid bolt to their car outside at the cover of darkness. Not soon after, a group of local militias arrives there, and suddenly arrests the two agents along with Kabid. At the prison, Ari is doing pull-ups while everybody watches. After doing his short exercise, Ari sits beside Sammy, and Kabid informs them that the local militia thought they were smugglers. Later that day, the trio gets released with the help of Walton Bowen, a CIA agent posing as a cultural attaché for the US Embassy in Khartoum, Sudan. It appears that the Mossad agents are being pulled out of the mission. Afterwards, Ari and Sammy arrive at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. After they exit the airport, they are greeted by a man who helps Ari with his luggage. Sammy informs Ari that he's not coming back with him. Ari exits the car and talks it out. Sammy informs his partner that he is finished with dangerous missions. He then rides a different car and bids farewell to his friend. At the Mossad headquarters, a TV shows the signing of a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Without warning, Ari barges into a man named Ethan Levin, who happens to be his boss. Ethan informs him that he's going to abort the mission. However, Ari protests the decision. Late at night, he arrives at his empty home. He plays a voicemail from his wife, Sarah. She notifies Ari that she left their daughter at her parents' house, and that she left some documents for Ari to sign. Later, Ari is doing some research by examining maps and files, trying to come up with a viable plan on how to help the Ethiopian Jews out of Sudan, and into Israel. After getting some leads, he rushes to Ethan's home at 4 in the morning. The next day, Ethan briefs Ari on not to oversell his plan to Mossad chief, Barak Isaacs. The chief hears out Ari's plan. Ari explains that due to other countries' forces, getting the Ethiopian Jews out of Ethiopia is impossible by air, but it's possible by sea. Barak argues that Ethiopia is landlocked or has no access to the ocean. Ari further explains that Sudan, where many of the African Jews are refugees, is only their way out. To make it short, They plan on posing as a diving resort owner and helping them from inside. Later, they are joined by the defense minister of Israel. After hearing Ari's risky proposal, as much as everybody in the room is against the idea due to its complication, they admit that it might work. The defense minister gives his blessings and the green light. The plan is in motion. First, he scouts Rachel Ryder, currently working as a flight attendant. Second, he visits Jake at Belize and offers him the mission. Then, he surprises Max at his hotel in Amsterdam after his assassination mission. And lastly, he convinces Sammy to join his mission crew at his clinic. After a briefing with Ethan about the mission, the team departs to Sudan. Upon arrival, Jake gets stopped by the airport security at immigration. Ari instructs Rachel to proceed with the plan. Jake explains that he got stopped and was extorted by the airport staff for some bribe. Back in US Embassy, Walton orders his assistants to find everything about a company called Nadker. Rachel and Ari proceeds to the Ministry of Tourism in Sudan to work on the legitimacy of their diving resort. They are met by the head of tourism, Colonel Madibo. He explains that their president understands the benefits of a growing tourist economy for Sudan, and he asks for $500,000 per year. Ari is somewhat surprised by the price, since they agreed over the phone on $250,000. The colonel stands his ground in the negotiations of $500,000, saying it was always the price. All this happens while gunshots are heard in the background. Rachel, annoyed and curious about the gunshots, stands up and tries to check where it was coming from. Colonel Madibo warns Rachel not to, stating that the president has many enemies, and now fewer, indicating that the gunshots they heard were of executions in progress. Ari offers $350,000 and suggests that they can write it down as $250,000, and sarcastically says that he can take the rest to do something beneficial for the people of Sudan. The colonel laughs heartily, accepting the bribe. The party arrives at the desert paradise, the Red Sea diving resort. The hotel structure around was not as they expected, but they figured they could work it out after a little bit of cleaning. Later, they met with the local staff. At the cover of darkness, Khabib meets up with Ari and he explains that on top of the food shortage, they have another problem. A new ruthless Mukhabarat tribe commander, Abdul Ahmed, is hunting down escaping refugees. The next day, the team is having a meeting on a boat. They conclude that the first exfiltration was to happen on a Friday, the darkest Friday of the month, which happens in 2 weeks. Sammy suggests a dry run to help them familiarize themselves with the terrain. Ari ignores the suggestion and commands everybody to get their work right. About 12 miles off the coast of Sudan, an Israeli Navy ship named Waverly is on standby, waiting for their allies at land to make radio contact. Jake was able to set up the radio, and everything was all set for their first exfil mission. Everything was going so well until a group of tourists arrives unexpectedly. This was not part of the plan, and it frights the others, thinking it would mess up the whole operation. Ari, on the other hand, calmly orders everyone to check the tourist in, telling everyone to fake it until they make it. Make the hotel operational because they all knew at one point this would happen. Finally, after a tedious preparation and unforeseen stumbling block, the team sets out on the same night. Meanwhile, the Mossad chief, along with Ethan, monitors the situation. Ari and the others arrive at the rendezvous point. They didn't spot anyone at first, it somewhat discourages the others, but Ari stays optimistic. Sooner, Khabib descends the rocky hills, and the African Jews follow. They fill up the 2 large trucks that the team brought. At the same time, a platoon of Israeli Navy SEALs sets out from Waverly. Back to Ari's team, they spot a checkpoint. So, Ari decides to gamble and push through the roadblock in sports mode to save time. The Sudanese soldiers manning the roadblock doesn't notice the trucks coming in until it is too late. Ari hits the soldiers' parked trucks to keep them from going after them. The soldiers try fighting back but they hit nothing. Eventually, the Navy SEALs, along with Ari's team, load up the boats with refugees. After the last boat was filled, Ari and the team realized that they saved 174 people. An impressive achievement. Then the boats arrive at Waverly, and ship captain informs the headquarters that the entire cargo is on its way home. Everyone at headquarters lets out a loud cheer of relief and joy at the successful mission. The next morning, Ari wakes up and chuckles at the sight of Max leading a Tai Chi class. It is a pleasant morning, everyone is doing their supposed roles in the fake hotel. Ari and Jake head out for a driving tour at a nearby shipwreck, only to be cut short by Colonel Abdul Hamid's surprise visit. Colonel explains that there was an incident last night, and he inspects their trucks for bullet holes. Fortunately, the men who manned the checkpoint last night missed all their shots, and lied that they hit the truck a few times. As Colonel finds no bullet holes, then they leave from there. Some German tourists arrive at the right time, and it makes a perfect cover for their secret agenda. It makes them less suspicious. After the Germans left, another group of tourists came one after another, which also made their missions successful one after another. As of September 1980, after 6 successful missions, they were able to rescue roughly about 1,830 refugees. And in August 1981, they were able to rescue more than 3,000 African Jews. As more and more were escaping the refugee camps, it frustrated the Sudanese administration, and it led in Colonel killing hundreds if not thousands of refugees, just to find out who was helping them. Back at the resort, Walton goes to Ari so he can warn them. Walton explains passively that Sudan receives a stipend for every refugee they house, and those whole refugee neighborhoods disappearing to thin air is causing massacres. Later, the team heads out for another routine mission. Ari warns Kabit of the impending danger, but the Africans continue with his mission. As they were loading the refugees to the boats, Max spots military jeeps approaching, and then the Sudan military starts shooting. A Navy SEAL is hit, and Sammy instructs another SEAL to apply pressure on the wound. Meanwhile, Max takes cover. Back at HQ, the Mossad chief and others monitor the situation closely. In a desperate attempt, Ari tries fooling the arresting Sudanese military. Then they are sent to prison, on suspicions of smuggling. On the same evening, Colonel Abdul locates Kabit's hideout. At the prison cell the next morning, Sammy lashes out his anger at Ari for being in a hole, and for not listening to his suggestions which would have saved them a few times. Rachel, on the other hand, finds a way to ask for help from Colonel Madiba to free Ari and Sammy. Not soon after, they are freed from prison. As soon as they get back to the resort, they find Ethan. Ethan informs Ari that it's time to pull the plug. Ari and the others find an injured Kabit. He was left alive after a friend bribed the guards. Due to the current circumstance, Ari's hands are tied, and he informs Kabit that they can have one last mission. A soldier accidentally discovers the hiding refugees, which forces Rachel to choke him to death. While Colonel Abdul was making a scene at the hotel. The next day, Ari asks for help from their American counterparts for the escape, and the Americans agree to help. Later that night, the team, along with the escapees, leaves the hotel. Colonel Abdul learns about the escape plan, and he rushes to catch them. Not soon after, Ari and his team, along with the African Jews, arrives at the rendezvous point in an old British airfield. As Colonel Abdul closes in, a large plane passes overhead. This prompts the colonel to move faster, fearing that they might escape. The plane then lands, and the refugees board the plane. The movie ends with Colonel Abdul Hamid arriving just as the plane was taking off. They were able to take a few shots but nothing significant. The plane takes off successfully, barely missing a tree in the middle of the runway, and arriving safely in Israel. And the movie ends. Please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow.